Uncle Dan.
Hey.
You know, I'm a big fan of Jay-Z.
Yes,
as you know,
I'm aware of your hip hop credentials.
I'm the rare gay man that prefers Jay-Z to Beyonce. But
Mark is the original hip hopopotamus.
I am the hip hopopotamus, and as I like to say, as Jay-Z likes to say, I got 99 problems, and evil ain't one of them.
Yes, well, I have a problem with evil. I think that evil is
suit yourself
bad, and I don't understand why it exists. Uncle Doug, help us!
Wait, whoa! That's a far larger assignment than I think I was tasked with. But fair enough.
That's what it is. You have to solve it.
To solve evil. That's what I have to do in the next 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Well, if you can do it in 15, that'd be great.
Well, dear uncles, I actually kind of thought about this segment when we talked last about the book of Ecclesiastes.
Oh, yeah.
Which has a chapter that wrestles with the idea of the problem of evil quite eloquently, but unsuccessfully, which is strange to find that chapter in the Bible, but there it is.
Yeah.
And so, if we go back in time, which we can't, to when our, ancestors first climbed out of the trees, and then one of them looked at the sunrise and said, I wonder why that is. Right? And which happened. This is the thing. This happened.
Yeah, well, after they tried to kill it.
Right, exactly. They threw their spears at it. Didn't work. But from that point on, there has been this, that was the birth of religion. We might not ever know. It was certainly the birth of a belief system because our pattern-seeking brains were trying to explain why the sun rose and set and the seasons changed. And so we, in all likelihood, came up with the idea of religion, of a higher power.
Right.
Because when our ancestors did a thing and caused something to happen, like killing an enemy died. And so the idea of causality entered the human brain.
Right.
And then
more specifically, early on, it wasn't a god, but many gods.
Right. Well, we don't know that, but that's a fair point, and we'll certainly explore that. That we believe that there to be causality in all things, and of course, we didn't know why the sun rose or the seasons changed, but we thought we could explain it, and so we created, we assume, religion to explain those things, and instantly was born this idea of the problem of evil. And we, as we'll talk about, this problem persists paradoxically to this day. But that if there were powers out there that could make the sun rise or set or the seasons change, that they could cause good or bad in the lives of the creatures that lived under them. We don't know what the religions of our deep ancestors were. But we do know that the religions we do know about were not monotheistic. They were polytheistic.
Right.
And as far as we can tell, that was a good way to explain the problem of evil. So let's back up for a second and explain what the problem of evil was and is. And, of course, it's very, very basic. It's why do good things happen to bad people?
It's why is there Doug?
Why is there Doug?
And as 2020 has shown us, why do bad things never happen to bad people?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the other side of the coin. Why do bad people prosper, right? Yeah. So we struggled with this idea of why is it good to be virtuous, and deep in our DNA is embedded the idea that we should help our fellow creatures out. And we're not alone in this. In a lot of higher creatures, like larger, more intelligent mammals, we see this kind of activity. But we see it in lesser animals too, where the good of the species is worthwhile to the good of the individual, right? But bad things befall us all. So the problem of evil is kind of, and again, this is such a strange thing to say, the problem of evil, but other religions have dealt with this in very interesting ways. So why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad things happen to good people? The polytheists, who, were the Greeks and the Romans and their ancestors, they had a very elegant solution for this. There were many gods. And many gods
were all assholes.
They were all assholes.
Yeah.
But the many gods had the same passions as the humans.
Yeah.
Right.
So if your crops failed, you probably somehow pissed off the god of the harvest. If there was a flood, you probably somehow pissed off the god of the ocean or failed to ameliorate their opposite god.
Right.
So that's one way of looking at it. The Hindus chose a different way of explaining this, where it's if you suffer some kind of evil in this life, it's because of some sin you perpetrated in a past life. And
Sure.
that sounds ridiculous because it is, but it has a kind of explanatory power. The Buddhists, they found a way to explain it by saying that if you can't properly find a way to separate yourself from the base level of the earth, then you're subject to its travails. So, okay, those are explanatory. But they basically, the way they explained the fact that evil happens to good people and the vice versa is just to kind of spread it around. Right? Like, okay, well, the gods themselves are kind of shitty. That doesn't necessarily explain away evil. It just kind of pushes it out. Right?
Sure.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
And I think, if I've read my histories of these things properly,
And what's the chances of
then
that?
very low, extremely low. For instance, the Greek or Roman pantheon, those gods were not, quote, worshipped in the same way that, say, the monotheistic God Yahweh in Christianity
Most definitely.
and Judaism.
Yeah, and we'll talk
they
about
were
that.
respected,
Right.
but they were not.
Well, because they could kick your ass.
Right.
Like, they were
Right.
respected in the same way that, like, a dipshit Trump supporter with an AR-15 in the Walmart is respected. Like,
That's exactly right.
you got to be careful with those guys.
Yeah.
It didn't explain away the notion of evil. It just kind of pushed it out, right?
Yeah.
So the quote unquote problem of evil didn't become acute until the monotheistic religions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. But at least in Judaism, Jehovah was a cunt, right? Like Jehovah. If you read the Old Testament,
He's the worst.
yeah, you can,
And so were the Jews. Like, this was a toxic relationship.
fair enough.
Yeah.
But in the Bible itself, Jehovah is ascribed with jealousness, vengefulness, regretfulness, pettiness, violence, manipulation.
Yeah.
He was impossibly cruel and oftentimes murderous.
And it
right?
was overt. It was the Lord God is a jealous God. It wasn't. That wasn't just like
It's in the text.
yeah.
Yeah, for death. So you can the paradoxical idea is that if something good happened to you in the time of Jehovah, it was harder to explain than why something bad happened to you, because Jehovah was just a terrible, terrible person.
Yeah.
Right.
Now we know now that he was probably subsuming other gods as it went,
Right.
and so their traits were ascribed to him. But it doesn't necessarily, or in any way, explain the problem, quote unquote, of evil. So you get past Jehovah, but we're into monotheism now, and we come across Jesus Christ, who is supposed to be this benevolent overlord who loves everyone and cares about us all, and the death of a sparrow is important to him.
Yeah.
Yet, terrible things happen all the time.
That Bible passage was on Dick Cheney's Christmas cards tells you all you need to know.
The fact that he actively hunted sparrows
Yeah. And ended up shooting his friend.
and occasionally shot his friends in the face for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we come to this place where we're kind of confronted with this idea that there is an ever-loving God, a single one, that loves everyone equally, et cetera, but bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
And that
That's an
is
issue.
a paradox that's very difficult to wrestle with. And so
For you, maybe.
But here's the thing, is scholars in even the time of Aristotle and Plato wrestled with this notion of what we call now theodicy. We'll get to why that's called what it is and what it means, but the idea that there is evil, that happens to everybody no matter how good a life you live. It was just a slight bit easier to explain in the time of Aristotle and Plato because the gods were kind of a mixed bag. And Jehovah was such an asshole that, like I said, it was kind of hard to not explain.
Yeah.
But now you enter the time of Jesus Christ, where he's supposed to be loving of all people. It's this total, love fest. All people are beautiful. Everyone's worth something. Yet, terrible things happen to everybody. Now, monotheism has been with us since the Bronze Age, and it was kind of easy to explain away why good things happen to bad people because it was the Bronze Age, and bad things happen to everybody all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it was kind of the number one
A good
leading
thing
cause.
happening was as rare as Haley's Comet.
Right. It was the leading cause of death up until a certain, recent history. But it wasn't until the Enlightenment where we started to really consider why. So let me back up just one more second. Thomas Aquinas and our friend St. Augustine wrestled with this a bit. And they were trying to figure out, even in the, in the context of the Black Death and the Crusades, why good things happen to bad people, or bad things happen to good people, etc. And they came up with the answer that persists to this day. It is the ultimate, one of the two ultimate get-out-of-jail-free cards of Christianity.
Right.
Any guesses?
Lord works in mysterious ways.
That's one of them.
And
Don't trust the white man.
don't go swimming for an hour after you eat.
Okay, three. There were three.
Right. What's the third one?
Free will.
Free will, of course.
Free will is the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card for why God does terrible things.
So explain that argument. Just
like you said, Uncle Dan, is there's just magic. And that's when you put anyone in a corner on a Bible story about, how did this happen? How did that happen? The flood, everything else. It's like, oh, just God is magic. Once you push them far enough into a corner, it's like, well, God's all-powerful. So, okay, we can have a flood that's global because God's magic.
Right.
The other corner you can push them into is like, why do good people who are in every way wonderful, why do bad things happen to them, or vice versa? Why do good things happen to people who are purely evil?
Right.
And the answer is inevitably free will.
Meaning?
Man is allowed, God is affording us on this earth the opportunity to
Fuck up.
to be tested.
Yeah.
Right.
And we will one way or another. You'll go this way, we'll go that way, and then we'll be judged in the end. Okay, so leave that aside for a second. That's where St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas landed, and many other scholars of the pre-Enlightenment. But we get to the Enlightenment, and then you've got Kant and Locke and Hobbes, who are not religious people. Right, so they stop focusing on the problem of evil and start focusing on the fact that evil is a problem. And it's that human beings are imperfect, up-jumped apes. We are passionate and, reactionary, and there is no higher power that's ascribing anything to us. There's no higher power that's governing us. It's just that from time to time we can be shitty. And that's a problem.
Well, and random shit can happen.
Also that. Hurricanes and earthquakes can happen, and they afflict everyone alike, and cancers can grow in the body. And so they were the first group, and again, let's not give too much credit to the Enlightenment scholars. Thomas Jefferson was certainly a great author, but he thought, you know what, she'll love it. So
He's a mixed bag, that's for damn sure.
A lot of mixed bags in the Enlightenment. But they were the first ones to say, you know what, maybe it's not about some higher power, it's just simply about the human condition.
Right.
But the strain of religious thinking that Augustine and Aquinas were espousing somehow survived the sunlight that was the Enlightenment to this day.
Yep.
So and free will is their thing. And so, the last philosopher I'll talk about, because it's kind of interesting, is Max Weber, or I guess Max Weber, who was born of the same morass and moral decay that gave light to to Marxism. Right. Because he was also working in London and Moscow in the late 1800s and early 1900s.
If you're going to be by city, you're going to have two homes in that time. Pick, one of them can be on the Mediterranean.
Seriously.
Yeah, go someplace sunny for half the year. Jesus Christ, London and Moscow.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And so what gave life to both Karl Marx's ideas and Max Weber's ideas were like, if you haven't read The Jungle, the meatpacking industry was so insanely onerous at the time.
Unlike now.
Right. No, but even exactly. But the horror stories was that somebody would slip and fall into the meat tank, and they would just get stirred into it and processed.
That's free meat, is what that is.
Right. Exactly.
Man meat ain't cheap, Doug.
Believe me, I know.
That's the title of Uncle Mark's memoir, actually.
That's my unauthorized autobiography.
Listen, I've had to settle for monkey meat this entire quarantine, so sacrifices.
You do live near the zoo.
That's true. So anyway, the problem of evil, as we're talking about, kind of somehow made it through the Enlightenment. But just to back up for a second, the term was coined by Gottfried Leibniz. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that right, in 1710 in his work Theodicy.
It's amazing that you weren't actually born in Germany. Your pronunciation is unbelievable.
Leibniz, by the way, looks like what would happen if the hairstyles of the 1980 Hair Metals band were brought to life and suckled on a steady diet of creatine and cocaine. Or Michael Warnke, either one. Yeah. So free will is the path that has allowed this notion to live to our day. So somehow today, even now, in our enlightened time, when people are kind of confronted by how do bad things happen to good people, free will is their get out of jail free card. And I want to just kind of touch on one example that I think both of you remember, or at least remember from kind of mythology, that is so onerous and disgusting, but I imagine is so ubiquitous in religious thinking. Mm. Do you remember a story when in Mormonism, a very severely Down syndrome kid went to have his patriarchal blessing? Mm. Do you guys remember the story?
No, it's not ringing a bell.
And he was worth a certain amount of cows, but they wanted it's a different story. Never mind. Go on.
So he went to have his patriarchal blessing, which we talked about in a previous episode, and the patriarch said, "This is really hard to say." He was one of the angels who literally cast Satan out of heaven with his own hands. And Satan, as he fell away from heaven, looked back at the angels who'd cast him away and vowed revenge strictly and directly upon them. What? So God, in his wisdom, struck this kid with severe Down syndrome. So
that was the cause of his Down syndrome.
Satan couldn't find him on this earth.
Oh, wow.
Do you guys not remember that story?
I've never heard that story.
Isn't that the plot of the movie Constantine? I'm not sure.
If I had heard that story, I would have burned the ward building to the ground.
I'm challenging any of our Exmo listeners. I'll bet you there are some that remember that story.
Oh my God.
I'm sure there are.
That's so fucking weird.
It's so fucked up because it explains away the this terrible thing, and let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
This disability that has befallen this person.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, okay, so what about every other person who has Down syndrome? What about every other person who's born with a disability? Do they all have personal stories to explain away this disability?
I mean, listen, a patriarchal blessing is basically a psychic reading.
At best, it's
And yeah, that's what they do. Is they try and come up with some. You were Joan of Arc in a previous life. You were this. I mean, it's the same shit.
It's like any past life regressive therapy. You were never a peasant. You were always you were royalty.
Everyone was royalty.
Yeah, exactly.
But I
was Catherine the Great. It was wonderful.
I don't want to dwell on this because it's so vile. But St. Augustine and Aquinas are just two of many, many scholars who have dug into this idea of theodicy as a way to explain away this notion of how bad things happen to good people. And there has been so much ink spilled on it, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that an omnipotent, omniscient, all-loving God, creator of the universe, who could solve any of these problems at any time.
Yes.
Doesn't because it's your fault.
Right.
Right.
Or just free will, but again, Free will, like the idea that, okay, well, humans should be allowed to make mistakes is a fine thing to think about until you talk about gay marriage or trans rights or anything else where a minority is allowed to express themselves under the rule of a majority. Right? It's always, always, always what's good for me, not for thee. Right? So, I don't... coming to the final point of this, it's a negation of the inevitable and obvious point that we have all come to understand, that the universe is vast. We are a fleeting blink of light on the surface of a single planet, and the universe doesn't really know about us, and if it does, it doesn't seem to like us very much. And so bad things happen, and it sucks, but we only have one life to live. And to try and find some kind of notion of like why bad things happen to you but not to me, or that bad things happen to you because you're evil, or good things happen to an evil person because God is biding his time, is so vile and evil.
Yeah.
And so if anyone ever brings up theodicy in an argument with you, they've lost.
Just walk away.
Well, that they really have no other option. I mean, if you're a believing Christian and you believe in that sort of God I just mentioned, but he fails to show his face and his hand whenever the world needs it, you've got to come up with a reason.
Well, and here's the thing. This whole idea, the whole argument of free will, this idea that God had to create a test for us, and that test required us all to have to be able to make our decisions, be they good or evil or whatever. It does, like, I've asked believers this: why can't God just make us all good? Why would there be a need for a test? And believe me, whatever their answer is, if you keep following the logic,
that's exactly right.
You'll come to a dead end. There's
Exactly.
no road where that logic makes sense. There's no way to go down where it makes sense for an omnipotent being to create beings that he claims to love implicitly, and then make them shitty.
Well,
just make us perfect from the beginning and skip the whole hell thing. There's no point to it at all, and everybody goes to heaven. We can even skip Earth. Let's just go to heaven and party. What's going on?
Well, and the problem of evil, which I think I just remember every time I've said that, I hope you understand there's giant air quotes about that, remains historically and will so forever be the biggest reason people leave religion, myself included. That there is no answer. There is no logical or satisfactory answer for why bad things happen to good people if there is any kind of a God who gives a shit.
Right.
And like if you see a dog on the freeway, Uncle Mark and I have experienced this firsthand, or a kitten in the street, or a child in distress, and you simply look over and say, well, you know what, free will.
Yeah.
You're a monster, and you don't deserve to be followed or worshipped in any way, shape, or form. So I just theodicy is just a very, very smart sounding word for a very inadequate explanation for the way the world is. And I don't love the fact that the universe is empty, but it is what it is, to quote Donald Trump, forgive me.
It is what it is. I mentioned this before on the show, and it's a very funny thing, except that it's caught up in the horribleness of all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter. But there was a meme online a while ago that was, a depiction of the Milky Way galaxy from a distance, and over it said "No lives matter."
Right.
And I think that goes to your point, right? It's like we are dust.
Dust in the wind.
But
all we are is dust in the wind.
It goes to the opening of this show. You only have one life. So make the best of it. Don't pretend it's something that it's not. Don't waste your time on notions that are destructive and useless. Like, this is it, man. We got this.
Yeah, stop making excuses for a shitty God that doesn't exist, for fuck's sake.
So it was a long-winded way for me to get there.
Right. Well, we loved it.
We got there. I like it. And I think that now that we've solved the problem of evil, we can move on.